Greetings viewers, welcome to my channel. Today's video is a bit sentimental. This is my first bass guitar and the neck, as you can see, is broken, and I've already done some pre-work off camera. It is an Ibanez GSR200. It's actually one of the earlier versions, 2001 to be exact, according to the labels. It's the earlier version where it doesn't have the battery inside. It doesn't have that little boost knob there with the 9-volt battery. And normally these basses are still made today, and they're at most $200 new. You could probably get them for a little bit cheaper than that, like maybe $160, $180, depending on where you go. But the backstory with this bass is I did get it, I think around 2002, and it was the first bass that I ever had, and it was given to me by my parents. And I didn't have it for too long, unfortunately, because the tragic event was that it got stepped on and it ruined the neck. It did have the fingerboard on there originally, but the truss rod was bent, and obviously you see the dovetail joint here had broken. But when it broke very cleanly. And I think it was on its way out anyway. Again, this is not a very expensive bass, but for the price of a new one, you might be thinking, well, gee, why even bother? It's sentimental to me. It's my first guitar that I ever had, and I'm going to use it as practice. I've left it in the bag for, it's probably got to be over 15 years at this point. Haven't really done anything with it. I just never had the heart to get rid of it, and I figured I'd do something with it if I can find another neck or something like that. Unfortunately, buying a new neck from Ibanez is not really practical. They make these in bulk and whatnot, and it would cost about the same amount as buying a new guitar. That being said, I'm not really putting a lot of money into this bass to begin with. I did spend $25 on a new Canadian maple fingerboard blank, which I got right here. And it's going to need some work to make it fit to the existing neck here. And then I also have to put a radius on it. And I'm going to try to make this into a fretless bass. And depending on how well I do, if I do good where it's not twisted or it looks pretty straight after I take all the measurements, then I may take a stab at putting frets on it at some point. Now, as you might assume here, I've been playing since 2002, playing bass. We're in 2021. I have not once ever owned a fretless bass, and I'm not a very good player when it comes to playing fretless. That's an entirely different animal altogether, an instrument. But, I figured I'd give it a try. I want the bass to at least be playable. I can noodle around with it just like I always have, and it'll make me feel a lot better that, it's a functioning instrument again, that I can still use it, and it's not just a bunch of scrap parts inside the gig bag. And I got the parts, as I mentioned. It's only a $25 fingerboard that I just had delivered a couple days ago. I did get a sanding block, which I'm going to need to use, which once the fingerboard is on there, I have to put a radius back on there. These blanks are actually flat and straight. So unfortunately, this is a 14-inch radius sanding block. I ordered a 12-inch, and now I have to wait to get the correct one. The original radius of this neck is a 12, so I want to keep it the same. And the 14, unfortunately, won't work. But I'm hoping I get to keep that, because you never know. I think most of my basses are going to be 12 inches. I'd have to measure it. So in the magic of editing here, what we're going to do is the first step is get this dovetail joint re-glued, and I'm going to clamp it down and let the glue dry. Now that I know that the truss rod is straight and I've already smoothed out the joint itself, I'm pretty sure that I can get at least that much done. And then from that point, we'll go to getting this fingerboard fitted here, and then we'll have to shave it down to the proper size. So through the magic of editing, we are going to get to that next point. And hopefully in that next segment, I'll have the proper 12-inch radius sanding block. Okay guys, this is an interim update, and this project is getting a little bit more complex than I originally had thought. Thankfully, I was already pretty far ahead of the curve here. I have a lot of those advanced tools already that I've picked up over the years. I did get the right sanding block, and I got plenty of the fretting tools and the leveling tools that I'm going to need to complete this. What I do have now is what's called a fret miter box. I'm not going to go fretless. I'm actually going to put frets on this, and this is a miter box where and then you have a template here. Not going to go into too much detail, but suffice to say, this is the right tool for the job if you want to put frets on a fingerboard, especially a new fingerboard blank like this. And it's really going to be helpful to make sure I don't screw it up. It's accurate. It's got notches here for the scale length that I'm using to make sure that all these fret slots are going to be put in the proper place. And it comes with, this came with this fret saw here. It came from these guys at Philadelphia, Luthier Tools and Supplies. Definitely check them out. This is a fraction of the cost of what Stuart McDonald would charge, and it's pretty much the same tool. Another thing, I happened to go on eBay, and lo and behold, I found a neck, and the original neck that fits. This serial number is from, I think, August of 2003, so just at the tail end of this production line of the original base that did not have the battery inside. This was not in the greatest of shape when I got it. I think I only got it for like $45, $50, and it's got a lot of scratches on top here. I tried compounding it out, so there's some flaws in it, and then the frets were obviously in pretty bad shape. Again, this is not a very expensive base, but I could have just stopped here. I fixed all the frets, I leveled them out, I polished them up. I got some nice new flat wounds on here, and it plays great, actually. I got the neck fitted properly, and it's strung up to pitch. I think that I could have stopped right here, really, and I'm happy that I'm able to have a functioning base, and it's my first base. But it's not the original neck, and I'm still going to go and make the attempt at fixing this neck. If it doesn't come out the greatest, I'm still going to be happy with whatever it comes out to be, because I put the effort in to actually get it to work again. So the next step here, I'm going to finish putting all the fret slots in here for all 22 frets, and then I'm going to then radius the fingerboard with the 12-inch radius. I'm going to start off with the 100 grit to get the initial shape in there, and then I'm going to go right to 320 grit sandpaper to kind of smooth it out and get that final look. And I may have to adjust the depth of the fret slots a little bit, so we're really going to be slotting first, we're going to be radiusing, and then we're going to be adjusting the slotting once again. There's actually a depth stop, if you will, for this saw so that you don't go too deep. And once we get those fret slots the way we need them to be, and then we're going to flip it over, and then we're going to have to start cutting the profile. So we'll have to cut it to the profile of this neck, and then at that point we'll be ready to glue it onto the actual neck, and we'll wait for the next update here. Alright guys, here's another interim update. I have been able to get to the point where I have the fingerboard now glued to the neck, and I've completed much of the rough sanding. And I do apologize, I have not been able to get a lot of this process on camera. I am recording this project over multiple weeks, just as this has really been more of a side project, as picking away at it here and there. But I was able to get the fingerboard on here. I have sanded it down to where it matches the profile. Now, the way I did that, it wasn't probably the best way to do it, and I'm sure there's specific tools that you can do to make that job a little bit easier. But what I did was I put the finished blank fingerboard here on the table. I put the neck on top of it, traced out the profile. As you can see, it's thinner at the nut, and then it widens out here once you get to the heel. Traced it out with the pencil, and then I used a Dremel tool attachment here. It's the mini saw attachment, and I cut outside that line. So when this was glued on, there was a little bit of wood sticking out on each side. From there, I went and used a drum sanding kit, which I have below there, and I got it as close as I could to the side of the neck. But now what I had the problem of was that it was all wavy up and down the neck here. And the way I fixed that was I have a straight edge that I use to level frets with, and I put some of the 100 grit sandpaper on there, and then using the heel here as a flat edge, I went back and forth on it to kind of get each side as straight as, basically it's a straight edge. It's going to go and get rid of any of those humps that I had created, and now it's exactly the profile that it needs to be. And I still got a couple small spots, so you could probably see it here where it didn't exactly adhere. I'll fill that in with some wood putty, and most likely you won't see that after it's all done. But the next thing I got to do is actually got to fit. It has been radius sanded here, but it's still a little bit thicker than the original neck. So the replacement neck, when I measured the rosewood fingerboard here, it's about 5 millimeters thick. And the one that I have on here, the Canadian hard maple, it's about 5.9, almost 6 millimeters thick. And while I could leave it like this, when I install the nut is actually going to sit too low because the fingerboard's too high, and that's going to cause action issues. I'm thinking that I'm probably just going to go and sand it down until I get it to almost about 5 millimeters on each side. And keep in mind, this is radius, so it's actually going to be a little bit taller on the in the middle of the neck. But I figure I'll go 5 millimeters here to get it as close as I can to the original. And if I have to put a shim on the bottom of the nut to make sure that the strings are at the proper height, then that's what I'll have to do. But I got a little bit more sanding to do. Once that's complete, then I can actually take the fret saw. I've installed the depth stop, and here's some of the fret wire I'm going to be using. The tang is right below it, and I don't know how well you can see it on camera, but I've adjusted the depth here so it's the depth of the tang. And then I'm going to go through each one of these slots very carefully, clean out the sawdust, and make sure that on the radius fingerboard that it is the proper depth, and it won't go any deeper than what I need to once that's complete. Then I can actually go and install the frets and do the fret job with my other fret tools. I got a fret press, I have the bevel piece here, or it's the bevel file they call it, where it cuts the frets and files them down at a 35-degree angle so you don't get any kind of fret sprout. That's going to be the best bet. After all the frets are in there properly and they're leveled, then I'm going to go and spray it with a nice polyurethane to get it nice and sealed, polish up the frets one more time, and then I can reassemble it with the tuners and the pegs right here. So just to surmise on this step, this has really been a complex build, and I can understand why luthiers get paid quite a bit of money for doing this kind of work. And granted, this is not a very expensive neck to begin with, but I'm certainly enjoying the process, believe it or not. It's really been a nice learning experience to really understand what kind of work goes into actually make a guitar by hand. And, a few comments on the tools. This tool was great. It didn't leave any kind of burrs or any kind of flaking on the edges when you cut it. And I used a straight edge here to make sure it didn't go and cause any kind of issues where if I cut it in the wrong, not in a straight line. That's really what you need to do. And I got a few other things here. I have my wood putty that I'm going to be using here. I've been using a lot of these tools here, but in between other projects that I have going on. So in the next segment, I'm going to have the sanding done and hopefully the frets installed, and we'll go from there. Okay, I was able to install the frets here, roughly anyway. As you can see, I have quite a bit of extra on the ends here, and I've been using the tools that I've collected over the years. This is my fret press vise grip here. It's got a couple different attachments here for the calls. So I got a flat, I got a steep round one, a smaller one for like mandolins, ukuleles, and then I have another one here that I was using before on some of the, as I got more towards the neck here. As you can see how the profile changes, I need something a little less steep before it goes flat. And I use the flat one here, and then I use the steeper one here on the ground to press the frets in. And I like that tool a lot because instead of using something more traditional like the fret hammer, where you bash each one in, this I did still use. You can tap on each of the ends here or use the plastic face here to kind of drive it in the rest of the way on the edges. But you don't get as much recoil when you're pressing them in like that. It actually turned out quite good. Now, the next thing I had to do, even before I got those frets in, I was going to use the depth stop on the fret saw here, but that turned out to be a little bit more tricky, and after looking it up and doing some more research, decided to grab this tool, which is called the refret saw from Stuart McDonald. It's got a push and a pull saw here, and it's the same thickness as the fret saw, and each one had to be little by little adjusted here to make sure that the depth was correct. The depth was fine in the middle, but since I radiused it, it did not have enough depth to fit the fret, so I had to go and do it on each of the edges here in order for the fret to fit. All the frets are curved with the radius, and the way I did that was I had one of these tools where it actually run it through the tool here, and it'll actually bend the fret wire for you automatically and make it very consistent. So nice little tool to have. So even after all that work, I'm still not done, because now that they're all in there good now, I'm going to have to cut the ends here once I'm done, but I'm actually going to glue these frets in. And the reason why, one, it's better for your tone. It takes up any space that might have been left over from cutting the fret slot a little too deep. And two, the ends of the frets here, especially around the edges here, even though I bent these fret wire pieces a little bit more steep than the actual radius, the ends here, which is a common problem where you get a lot of buzz, is on the edge of the frets will start to pop up. And the best way to do it to fix that is to put it back into the vise here that I have and pour a little bit of super glue on each side and then wipe out the excess. So the quick overview of the process for this step for gluing these frets in, I'm using some paste wax, Johnson paste wax. It actually was recommended by Stu McDonald. I'm using this book here for much of this job right here, and it's a really great book. It has a lot of good big pictures and visuals for you to kind of follow along. And for this process, what I'm doing is I'm taking a Q-tip of the wax, putting it on each side of the fret, which you can kind of see it a little bit here, and that's just so that the glue doesn't stick to the fret board here. And then what I'll do is I'll take my clamp here, clamp it down to hold it in place, and then using one of these whips here, they call them, you could spread a very tiny bit of glue here, and then immediately go and take a rag or a paper towel and wipe away the excess, and the wax will prevent it from sticking to the wood there. It'll be a nice and easy cleanup. It is very time consuming having to go through each one, but once I'm done with that, then I can go and take my fret cutter here and then cut the tang right off. And then I can then go to my next step, which is actually getting these fret barbs so I don't have any sprout. Okay, sanding is done, and now we're ready for a polyurethane spray. And I got the satin and not a semi-gloss or a gloss. I like the satin feel and the look. So we'll just put about 1 or 2 coats on here, depending on how much it needs. And this should be all done. Here we are the morning after. The satin finish has dried. I'm just about to take apart the masking tape here to look at the fingerboard. And just wanted to kind of zoom in on some of the repair spots. There's really only 2 major spots that I had to do. Obviously the dovetail joint, if I can try to focus in a little bit on this. You'll always see it, but you won't feel it. I was able to sand it down with some 320 grit sandpaper, very, very fine sandpaper, to get it to where you don't really feel it. And you know, this is where the major damage was. And then I'll try to move across the neck here. I sanded everything down as best I could, and I know the camera's going to probably lose focus. The only other place that I had to repair was there was a chip right there, and I just filled it in with some wood putty. Again, you're going to see it, but hey, you know, it's my first time redoing a neck. For my first try, I think this actually turned out very nice. Alright, here's everything unmasked. I have the string nut installed. I did have to put some shims underneath it to get it to the proper height, and I still got to put the headstock hardware on. That'll be last. I did level the frets off a camera, and that is a pretty involved process. There's a lot of YouTube videos about showing how to do that. And the good thing that I just wanted to mention one thing with gluing your frets in. Here, listen to the sound. That ping sound, that's what you want to hear, because what that basically means is now the fret is coupled with the neck, and when the fret vibrates, the neck vibrates with the string. If you didn't glue your frets in, the fret would only vibrate and it wouldn't transfer that energy to the neck, and that robs you of your tone. Very important. I learned that from Stu Mac, and really I'm glad I did that. It was a lot of time spent doing that, and then a lot of time leveling these frets even after they were installed. A lot of a learning process, but I'm very happy with the result. Is this 100%? Is this perfect? No. not at all. But I was able to perform all this work for myself and learn a lot along the way. I do see the joint where it broke, but I don't feel it. I've sanded it down very smooth, and the satin finish I really like. Only other place that, as I mentioned in the previous segment, is I had that little chip. That's been fixed, but I think it actually has character now that it has everything has been finished up, except for one thing: no fret inlays. I was gonna go and do the inlays with actual inlays using the plunge router Dremel attachment there, and I may use that I will use that in the future, probably on a future build, now that I have more confidence of redoing a neck by hand. But I'm going to cheat a little bit on this and go a little bit on the cheap route. I picked these up off of Amazon. These are the abalone blue, and these are just basically inlay stickers. You stick them on here, and that should be it. I've been told that these work very well. They actually stay on your guitar, and hey, let's give it a try. And hey, I'm sure it's going to look great once I get this all finished, and I'm also going to do them on the side here. All right, the final inlay project is now done, and I'm going to call this project done. The neck is fully rebuilt, and I got my inlays installed here. Let me see if I can adjust the camera so I can get you a little bit better picture. I did put some lemon oil on the fretboard, and I actually did the oil after I installed the fret inlay stickers just as a test to see how well they would hold up. And yeah, it's great. I mean, you could feel them, they're there, but I also did them on the side as well. But they look great. I mean, from a distance, you wouldn't be able to tell. Some of them are off a little bit. I did eyeball them. I wasn't really trying to measure them, but hey, from a distance, you're not going to really notice it. And for some reason in the kit, they give you these size inlays, the smaller ones, but they don't give you enough to do an entire neck. And then it goes to these bigger inlays, which is not a big deal. It still looks great. In terms of compared to the original neck, well, this is the original neck, and that's the one that I found off of eBay. But the original came with a basswood neck material and then a rosewood fingerboard. You can see how the similarity is there. But hey, I think that this would sound great once I get it installed. I'll have to do all the fitments and whatnot to get it properly fitted back to the body here. But I'll do that in a later video. And hey, I'm very happy and grateful for how it turned out. All right, guys, just wanted to say thank you. I know this video has gotten a lot longer than my videos usually do, and there's a lot of work that I did to this neck off camera that I didn't put in the video. There's a lot that went into it. I want to say about 10 to 12, I'm going to say 12 solid hours of labor and time invested from the time that this was just pieces inside the gig bag to what you see now and in the state that it's in. Very happy, in fact, very grateful that I was able to get the neck to the state that it's in, because now I'm going to be able to install it on my original bass here that I learned on, and it's something that I've really had a passion for most of my life. And I'm glad to be able to share this with everyone here on my YouTube channel. Again, if there's any questions, comments, please leave it down below. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. As far as just to kind of summarize a few last things here to wrap it up here, we're looking at $25 and change for the cost of the fingerboard, about $14 for the fret wire, about $11 and change for the inlays. That's just the material. The rest is labor. And taking on a project like this, it's very time consuming, but you also have to have the right patience for it. This I probably would have had a lot easier of a time doing it had I had a full-on woodworking shop. This is not something that you can easily do here in your home office. It's definitely not something I would recommend, but thankfully it's turned out great, far better than what I would have expected it to, and it's definitely been a great learning process. Probably won't want to do it again, but I'm at least knowledgeable of how something like a guitar neck, a bass neck, whatever it might be, an instrument neck, is involved making it and fixing one by hand. This thing was probably churned out in a matter of seconds back at the factory, but the craftsmanship when you have a custom-built guitar is something that you have certainly have a deeper appreciation for. Again, if there's any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you so much for sticking along with me, and catch you on the next video.